let me quickly explain something that some of you may not be familiar with. It's not a big deal at all, but let's talk about the dating system that they use in AP World History. Okay, you see right here it says BCE right there. Anybody know what that stands for? Okay, before the Common Era. Did y'all cover this last year? Okay, you just know that. Okay, all right. So most people are more familiar with using BC to describe this right here, and then tell me, we are in the year 2025, and so when I put BC next to it, what would I put next to it? What? Okay, so most people would say AD, and that's fine. Okay, but you could also put, what's the other one? CE. Okay, all right. So let me explain what's going on here. Maybe going back to the 1970s, I have to go back and check and see when this got started, but maybe back in some 1970s, 1980s, you had some historians who felt like they wanted to take the Christian influence out of the dating system because not everybody in their classrooms were Christian, and so but they also didn't want to completely reinvent the dating system because that would have been really confusing. And so what they did was they simply took BC, which stands for before Christ, okay, and they made that BCE, which stands for before the Common Era. It's exactly the same thing. Okay? It's exactly the same thing. Okay? And then they took AD, which is Latin for in the year of our Lord, but you can think of it as after Christ if you want to, before Christ and after Christ. And they took that and changed it to CE, the Common Era. But there's no, if on the AP exam, if you use AD or CE, it doesn't matter. They don't care. They're not going to count off for anything. So I just wanted to point that out to you just so you wouldn't be confused or wonder what that is right there. Okay. If you have questions, you can ask me later on, but I think that's pretty easy. All right, so period one, we call this foundations because we're just getting started here. Now we're starting in the year, well, around the year, very much around the year 8000 BCE. Clearly, there was stuff going on before 8000 BCE, but as you're going to see here in the next few minutes, around this time period, we can't be certain exactly when, but around this time period is when man learned how to farm. Okay. And once we learn how to farm, that's kind of when history begins, more or less, because farming leads to civilization. And one thing that goes with civilization is writing. Okay? And history really starts with writing at that point in time. Now, again, things were going on before this, but we don't really know what was going on. Sometimes anthropologists and archaeologists can give us some hints, but there's not a lot. But history begins with the written word that we can study. Okay. And then we're going to go all the way up to 600 BCE, which will be the end of this time period and the very, very beginning of what we call the classical period, which is the Romans and the Greeks and stuff like that. We'll get into them later on. Okay. So I told you that I will always start off with an acronym, and here it is. Here is your first acronym. This will be on your test. And I'm going to go ahead and tell you a test question right now. I'm going to ask you to define the time period. I will always ask that question on every test. It's an easy 1+1 question, like what color is the sky? Okay. You know that it's always going to be there, and all you have to do is write down 8000 to 600 BCE. You can put the BCE behind 8000, or you can leave it off, but you better have it behind 600, because if you don't have it there, that's actually kind of implying that you're meaning 600 CE. So you make sure you put that BCE behind it, and you should be golden. But I will warn you, every year I fight this battle. I used to give the test on paper. Now they're going to be in the AP classroom, but it doesn't matter if it's on paper or in the AP classroom. When students get to that screen, the very first thing it's going to say, define the time period. I don't know why, but students leave it blank. Not everybody, but some students will skip past that. And what you're going to see instead is you're going to see a D, a T, an H, or maybe you're going to see 2 or 3 letters. Okay. And they will jump in there and they'll tell me what the D is and give me the definition for it and so forth. And they just move on and they just leave that blank right there. And then later on, when we go over the test, they're like, oh my God, I didn't see it. And I have tried so many ways to make it like super obvious, but some people they just move too fast. Okay, so let's start off with the D. D stands for domestication. We're talking about plants and animals. Plants such as wheat Animals such as goats. Now, that phrase such as, I need, just like that word because, I need you to fall in love with that word, that phrase such as. Because forces you to do what? Explain. Such as forces you to give examples, specific examples. On the AP exam, on your writing, if the DBQ, LEQ, and your SAQs, on the writing, giving evidence is worth points. Now you might say, well, what is evidence? Evidence is specific examples, okay? Details, okay? So when you see that word evidence, don't think, what is evidence? It's just specific details, okay? That's not specific. If you simply write plants, no points. If you write plants such as wheat or corn, okay, that's two examples right there. That counts as 2 points for evidence, okay? Animals such as goats or chickens or pigs, there's your evidence right there, okay? Technology. Do you think the word technology counts as evidence? Yes or no? No, but if you say technology such as gunpowder, boom, gunpowder right there, okay? So use that phrase such as to make yourself give examples. Okay, moving on. Agriculture. And we're going to talk about how all this happens. So I'm not going to explain it all right now. We're going to explain it in the next few minutes, but not right now. But agriculture leads to patriarchy. Patriarchy is rule by men. Patria is Latin for male or father, like as in papa. Archy always means rule. Higher pop meaning higher population. Agriculture leads to more people. It also sadly leads to more disease, and we'll talk more about that in a little bit. River valleys. I've given you two. There's more than two, but here, such as the Indus and the Nile. Where is the Nile?
It's in Egypt.
Egypt, good. Where is the Indus? It kind of depends on what time period you're looking at, kind of. If you were to say India, I wouldn't count it wrong, but technically it's not in India today. If you say South Asia, you'd be right. Anybody know what I'm hinting at? Where is it today? Good. Very good. Very good. Okay. All right. Trans-regional trade and technology. I'm cheating a bit here. I'm getting 2 T's in for the price of 1. Trans-regional trade. Trans-regional is one of your vocabulary words, meaning between regions, across regions. And I've given you one example right there. Mesopotamia, modern-day Iraq, was trading with the Indus civilization over there in Pakistan, South Asia. We know that because we have found artifacts from each in the other's area. Now, technology of this time period included plows. Farmers learned how to use plows, invent them. Now, money. This is coins now, guys. This is not paper money. We're talking strictly coins, metal tokens. Paper money will come later. The wheel was invented during this time period. And pottery. There's other technologies too. This is not a comprehensive list, but those are some good examples. And everything up there you see is evidence. And finally, your H. H stands for Hittites. The Hittites were a people who lived in southeastern Turkey. Like if you were to look at the country of Turkey today and kind of put your finger on the lower right-hand side of it, that's about the area where the Hittites lived, just north of Iraq. To the best of our knowledge, and again, we're constantly making new discoveries, so we may have to rewrite the history books. But for now, we're giving the Hittites credit for being the first people to use iron on a large-scale basis. You can find some examples of it maybe in some other civilizations a little bit earlier, but it was very small scale. The Hittites seem to have cracked the code, found the secret to how to use iron on a large-scale basis. And the cool thing about iron is it holds an edge. It's stronger. It holds an edge longer. Okay, and iron was the super weapon of its day. It was the nuclear bomb Death Star of its day. Okay, and so the Hittites had a better weapon than anybody else, and they used that superior weapon to conquer Mesopotamia to their south. Okay, now how would this appear on the test? Well, you see right over here. Okay, on the test after the time period, I'll just have a letter or two, okay, 3 letters, and you're gonna have to, so the D, what are you gonna write right there?
Domestication.
You're gonna, okay, now you're gonna write domestication. Now some students will make a mistake though, so listen carefully right now. Don't zone out on me. If you only write domestication, you're going to miss the question because you need to write domestication and then give me this after it. There'll be no word bank, no definition bank. It's going to come from your memory. Now, how do you study for this? Well, you look at this for a while, you say it out loud a few times to yourself, you take out a sheet of blank paper, you hide your notes so you're not looking at this, and then you try to write it from memory. Then you flip your key over, you flip your notes over and compare what you wrote to your notes to see if you got it right, and then you keep doing it until you get it right. And then you practice it a few more times. And since you've got me for 7th period, the day of the test, advisory, try it again. Okay, right before the test. Yes, sir.
Do we need to write it exactly or just like this?
Exactly. Yeah, you give me what I give you. Okay, you give me what I give you. All right. Okay. Now the bookends. I will always tell you what sets the time period apart from the one that came before and the one that comes after. Like what event closes out the time period. So this is what opens the time period. We've already talked about it. Okay. Man learns how to farm. We discover agriculture. And this is what leads to your earliest civilizations, like the Egyptians. Your closing bookend, sadly, most of those river valley civilizations collapse. They don't continue. Now, when we say they collapse, we mean like their cultures disappear. Obviously, there's still a place called Egypt today, and you can still go see the pyramids that were built back during this time period. But here, this might help you understand what I mean by collapse. What was the writing system of the ancient Egyptians?
Hieroglyphs.
Hieroglyphics, good. Do people still write in hieroglyphics? No. Okay, good. So now you understand. Okay, that culture right there. Remember, writing goes under culture. Okay, that whole system of writing has gone. Okay, it's disappeared. It's extinct. Now there is one of these 6 civilizations that will continue, though. It's still around today. It's the oldest continuing civilization in world history, or continuous civilization. Anybody want to guess?
China.
You are correct, sir. Very good. Okay. China's civilization has never collapsed. Now it's evolved, it's changed, it's transformed. But you could, for example, you could look at Chinese writing today, and you could look at the earliest Chinese writing from this time period, and you can see a direct line. Okay. Now, I'm not saying Chinese writing is exactly the same. No, obviously it has evolved. They've added more characters and things like that, but you can still trace the development of the current writing system of China to this original, okay, writing system. So they've never lost their civilization. Okay? They've definitely they've changed political systems over time, okay, but they've never lost their culture. Okay, okay, moving on here. What came before? We need to talk about what things were like before man learned how to farm, so you appreciate the big change that takes place with farming. So we believe, to the best of our knowledge, that humans, Homo sapiens, got their start there in East Africa somewhere, probably near the coastline. Lots of fossils and things like that have been discovered near the coast. That's probably because fishing is a pretty reliable source of food. And from there, they moved out across the world. And I'll show you a diagram here in a minute of that migration. Now, it didn't matter where you were in the world. Everyone pretty much did the same thing for a living. They were hunter-gatherers. And when we say hunter, that includes fishing. That's part of that. Okay. Now, it was divided by gender, though. It was the men who were mainly doing the hunting and fishing, and the women who were doing the gathering or the foraging. That's when you simply go and try to find something out there to eat: berries, nuts, maybe some bugs, whatever it might be. But no one was farming. And the children would usually be helping the women with the foraging. This was called the Paleolithic or the Old Stone Age. Paleo meaning old, lithic meaning stone. We believe that there was greater gender equality. Now, be careful how you read that. We're not saying that men and women were equal. We're just saying that the gap between men and women was not as great as it will be once farming is developed. Now, how do we know that? Obviously, people weren't, there was nobody recording history back then. Well, there are still a few societies today that live this same hunter-gatherer lifestyle. It's like in the Amazon rainforest, for example. Okay? And there are people who have gone out there and studied these hunter-gatherers, and they have noticed that there is greater gender equality amongst them. And so we extrapolate and we figure, well, if that's the way they do it now, that's probably how it was back then too. We can't know for sure. All right, their populations were small. There wasn't enough food to support a big population. They tended to move around a lot because they're hunting. And if you stay in one place and hunt, you will kill all the animals or run them off. And so they were frequently moving. Now, one nice thing about this, though, is there was very little disease. Because with a small population, it's kind of hard for diseases to jump from one human to another. The other thing is humans are nasty. And when humans stay in one place, that means we poop in one place. Okay? All of our waste is over there. Okay? And it piles up. Okay? Right over there. Okay? And then sometimes, okay, well, first off, you're already, that's the breeding ground for disease right there. And then sometimes that stuff over there gets into our water supply or our food supply. Okay, like when it rains, for example. Okay, and then that can spread disease that way. And people didn't know how it was spread back then. Okay, all right. So the nomads had little. We've also discovered that they anthropologists say that these nomadic peoples, when they look at their bones, they were bigger. Okay, then not necessarily bigger than us, maybe a little bit, but they're particularly bigger than some of the earliest farmers, because your earliest farmers, they weren't eating very much protein. They were mostly eating carbs, like wheat and that kind of stuff, grains, and so they weren't getting a lot of protein. Whereas these nomads, they tended to have more protein in their diet, so they were actually bigger. Okay? So there's a difference between them. Okay, this is also the time period when man learned how to use fire. And we believe that it was fire that actually unlocked our brains, because when you eat meat, if you eat meat raw, it's hard for your body to break down that tissue, okay, and get to the nutrients, the protein, and so forth. But when you cook meat, when you put it in fire, it breaks the membranes, the cellular membranes down, and your body is able to access the nutrients better. And we believe that added nutrition, thanks to fire, allowed our brains to begin to develop, and language and stuff like that came after that. So, okay, so there's the map that I mentioned I would show you. So here was where we believe, okay, humans got their start, okay, and then from there they migrated out, and the last places they reached were probably in Australia and in South America over here. This is probably the last places they got to, okay. But then again, we're always making new discoveries and having to push these dates back. So take it with take it with a grain of salt. This is the best information we have. Now up here, look at this right here. Can somebody tell me what is this area called today? Well, this would be Alaska and this would be Siberia. What's this part right here called? Well, yeah, the ocean. You're not wrong. Can we be more specific? Anybody know? They're working on the ACs over here. That's what you're hearing. Okay. It is a strait. Do you know what strait it is? No. It's called the Bering Strait. Sorry, it's coming off the screen right there. The Bering Strait. So today this is water right here. Okay, but back then it was land. It was dry thanks to the ice age. The ice had a lot of the world's water trapped up in it, which lowered sea levels, and then animals were able to walk across from Asia into North America, and then nomads followed them into North America and then down. And also, we're pretty certain that these earliest humans were also using water transportation. To what extent, we don't know for sure. Probably just along the coastlines to work their way down. They probably certainly weren't walking all the way down. Also, one nice thing though is horses. Horses actually got their start here. Okay. But they were able to walk across that land bridge over, so it wasn't just a one-way street. There were animals over here also moved over into here, which was good because something happened to most of your large animals over here, okay, like your mammoths and so forth. And by the time the Europeans came over here, there were no horses. They were gone. Okay, they were gone. But the Europeans brought the horse back. So it's kind of interesting that the horse makes a world tour. Okay, starts here, goes over here, okay, and eventually over here, and then eventually across the Atlantic and then back over here to this area here. So it returns home. Okay, okay, moving on here. Okay, so farming. Okay, so this is what starts the time period. It's called the Neolithic or the New Stone Age or the Neolithic Revolution. Now, when we say revolution, we don't mean like a war. It's a new way of doing things, and that's what this is. This is one of the two biggest changes in human history because farming completely changes everything. Anybody know what the other one was? Industrial Revolution. The Industrial Revolution. Good. Okay, we'll get to that later on this school year. Now, farming is what leads to more population because there's more food. When you've got more food, people are going to survive. They're going to have enough to eat. They're going to live longer. So children will make it into adulthood. There's also an incentive to have larger families when you're a farming community. Dad is out there farming, not mom, dad, because if you don't know, farming's actually harder work than hunting. Okay, and so dad's got hunting. You go out in the morning, you catch something or you don't. Okay, but farming, you're out there all day long. It's hard work, and so men being more muscular, okay, stronger, were better suited for farming. And so daddy is out there in the field farming, but dad could use some help. Another pair of hands would mean that dad can grow more food. Okay. All right. So where's he going to get the other pair of hands from? Children, exactly. Mom is back in the house, probably pregnant, okay, and she's taking care of all the little ones while she's pregnant with another one coming up. Okay, there was also a lot of child death back then. They did infant mortality was high, and so they constantly were pretty much trying to keep having babies. And so people who live out in the countryside in rural areas, they tend to have large families. People who live like in urban areas tend to have small families because there's an incentive for farmers to have lots of kids, okay, especially boys, because boys can help. Yes. Is that why over in Asia they would like disregard females when they were first born? Partially, yeah. Okay, now then, here's a mistake some students make. You think that because we learned how to farm, every human started farming at once. Okay, no. There are some parts of this world where you just can't farm. There's not enough rain. It's too cold. Sometimes they just don't want to farm. Okay. There are other lifestyles. There's other ways to live. And one of the ways that you need to learn is called pastoral nomadism. We already know what a nomad is. It's somebody who moves around. But that word pastoral is similar to the word pasture. What do you find in a pasture? Animals, cows, livestock, okay, goats, sheep, camels, okay, horses, okay. This type of lifestyle It developed in different areas, okay, but one of the main areas it developed was in Central Asia on this what they call the steppes. Okay, I want you to think back for just a second to. I know you hate to do this, but think back to seventh grade, okay, Texas history, and then you also touched on this in eighth grade too. I know you did. Okay, if you go up to North Texas and then go a straight line to Canada, okay, basically the middle section of the United States. What is that region called? What? No. What's the middle of the United States called? Nebraska, Kansas.
Wheat, something like
Well, what'd you say? No, but he said wheat, and they grow a tremendous amount of wheat. What? Well, it is people do refer to it as the breadbasket in the United States. You're not wrong because we grow so much wheat there. But I know you learned this. It's called the Great Plains. The Great Plains. The Great Plains before. By the way, wheat came over from. We brought that over here as part of the Columbian Exchange. There was no wheat here before the Europeans showed up. Okay, but so then tell me, what do you think the Great Plains were covered in, if not wheat? Don't say corn. Grass. Okay, grass. Good. Okay. What thrives on grass? Good, exactly. So here in North America, the buffalo, the bison, okay? But over there in Central Asia, these steppes are also covered in grass. And so horses, cows, camels, goats, sheep, okay? That's what these people were. They were herders. They were herders, okay? And without fences, they just simply moved their herds around from one grassy field to another. And they domesticated the horse. Okay? They domesticated the horse, and these pastoral nomads developed a very aggressive culture because out there on the steppes you have lots of predators, okay, that wanted to try to kill the sheep and goats and things like that, and then like wolves, for example. But then you also have humans, okay, who would love to steal another man's livestock. Okay, and so these Central Asian nomads learn how to do things not only like ride horses, but also shoot bows and arrows very accurately. Okay, now these Central Asian nomads, they play a very important role in world history because let's say you've got a farming community way over here in Western Asia, okay, and you've got another farming community way over here in East Asia, thousands of miles away, okay, but these pastoral nomads on the steppes, they're moving their herds of animals back and forth with the seasons, okay? And so when the nomads reach this community right here, sometimes there's fighting and conflict, but more often than not, there's actually just trade. These pastoral nomads, since they've got so many animals, they've got leather, they've got meat, they've got milk that they can trade with these farmers here who have grain. They may have like cloth or whatever, and then the nomads move with their herds and they come to this community eventually. And now these nomads, they don't have just leather and meat and milk. Now they've got some stuff that they got from these people right here. And now these people have it. Okay. And they may have some things that the nomads had never seen before. And so the nomads take their stuff and move it over here. So the nomads are like a conduit. That's one of your vocabulary words right there. Okay. They are moving information and products from one place to another. Okay? So these people don't move, but the nomads do. And it's called cultural diffusion. All right. Now, farming leads to men dominating because once we begin to farm, the women are taking care of the children and they're not putting food on the table. And so men were seen as more important because they are the ones feeding the families. Social classes develop. Some people's jobs are more important than others. Farming is something that most anybody can do. It's important, but it's not as important as other jobs. Like, for example, you may have priests. Talking to the gods is most people usually think of that. That's pretty important, and not everybody can do that. Making things out of metal, a metallurgist or a blacksmith. That's a high skill right there. So some people's jobs elevate them. They're more important than other people. All right. So, oops, excuse me. I wanted to show you this real quick here. Okay. One of the cool things about China is this area of Asia is they had access to at least two key grain crops. This northern China, really good for growing wheat, like in the Great Plains of the United States. This area of China, southern China, is really good for growing rice. And so when you have two grain crops like that, that produce lots of carbs, then what happens to your population? Uh-huh. You understand why China has such a large population because they had a lot of food right there. Okay. Notice it says nomadic invasions right here too. They got nomads coming in from every different direction here. Okay. How do you read this? That's right. She just did like this from the bottom up. That's right. Okay. So you look down here, agriculture, that leads to a food surplus because you don't have to eat everything that you grow all at once. You can store grain for a rainy day or a winter time or whatever. Okay. And then when you have a food surplus, you can trade it. Okay. You also need things like, for example, pottery to store it or granaries to store it. You need warriors to guard it. It leads to all this kind of stuff up here. We'll talk more about this later on. Okay, the Neolithic details on the Neolithic Revolution. The type of farming that develops is called slash and burn agriculture, and this helps spread technology. You probably already have heard of slash and burn farming. What happens is you move into an area, you burn the forest down and all the vegetation. The carbon that is introduced into the soil is fantastic for growing plants. Unfortunately, though, it's kind of like eating a candy bar. You get a sugar rush. So you get a lot of energy, but in a very short span of time, and then you crash. Same thing happens here. The soil gets that candy bar, but then in a few years, though, you plant your seeds and they just don't grow like they used to. So what do you have to do? You got to move and burn some other forest somewhere. Okay. But what this causes, though, is it causes the knowledge of farming to spread. You move into a new area, there's some people already there. They see how you're farming, they learn how to farm. Now, man had domesticated dogs back during the time of hunting and gathering, but most other animals, though, like chickens and goats and so forth, they're domesticated during this time period here. Now, this is going to be a test question, probably. Once you have surplus food, like I mentioned a while ago, you're going to have more people. But when you have more people, not everybody needs to be a farmer. We've already got extra food. So that frees up people to specialize in different things, like learning how to make pottery, or learning how to weave cloth, or learning how to be a carpenter, or a bricklayer, or a blacksmith, or a warrior, or a priest, or a king. And that leads to social classes. It also leads to trade. We've got extra stuff. How about if we trade it with those people over there who don't have this stuff? Government is created because you're going to need to make people do things that they don't want to do, like digging ditches or building walls. We need those things, but that's a big job. So you're probably going to need somebody to make them do it. And it's going to cost money too. We're going to make them pay taxes. But once you start paying taxes, though, we need a way to record to make sure who's paid and who owes. And that leads to writing right there. Some of the earliest writing, actually, we found it like on like what you would think it was a brick, and it's cuneiform, and we can read cuneiform. And what these bricks are, they're deeds to land. It basically it's like property. So you put that brick down, and everybody knows this piece of land is yours. It's like a receipt. Okay, and so that was some of the earliest writing. And then once you have that kind of stuff, then you can start recording things like recipes and songs and poetry. That will come later on. But we believe the immediate reason for writing was for record keeping for stuff like taxes and who owns what. Okay? All right, guys, let's stop there for the day. Okay, we'll pick up here on Monday. Make sure you get get your chapter 1 read.
Should we open like a first Monday?
Is what now?
This.
I'm going to continue this on Monday. Yeah, I'll pick up here on Monday.
Maybe I'll write this.
Yeah. I actually just recorded this, so you'll be able to find it on Canvas. Okay.
Like how you mentioned China being with civilizations. Because like I know like fracture, at least.
It